From Bitcoin, blockchain or distributed ledger technology to cryptocurrencies, tokens and initial coin offerings, it seems everyone involved has something to say, but can you really trust their advice? One man's had enough of weasel words and charlatans and is ready to give you impartial, independent analysis. With digestible blockchain bites, ICO analysis and need-to-know news on cryptocurrencies, author, speaker, transparency and clarity advocate and award-winning software innovator Barry James brings you Radio ICO.
Hello again, this is Barry James from ICO Radio with Blockchain Bites, and this week as we move towards Easter, I'm kind of sandwiched between a really exciting event we had on Friday where we were able to introduce 8 really innovative and exciting ICOs to a group of 50 plus top level Chinese investors in the heart of the city of London. In fact, looking across and indeed down at St Paul's Cathedral. And that was one of the most exciting events, certainly of the season, and possibly any of the exciting events that we've been involved in and putting together. Partly because of the level of intense interest from our Chinese friends, but also because of the diversity even within the 8 selected ICOs that we were able to present in the time available, both in the room and using our TokenIntelligence platform, which will be actually launched shortly. This was a pre-launch beta, and as I say, very exciting. But also because, as I say, of those ICOs, and very quickly, there were 8 of them. ALAX, a mobile game distribution platform, which is building on the success of a well-established platform. Ethereum, a decentralized social betting platform built on Ethereum. That's Ethereum, built on Ethereum. The Booking Token Unit, a decentralized booking protocol currently undergoing standardization in the Ethereum ecosystem, that is planning to be ERC 808. And some interesting questions are arising there as to the protocol and how money is made out of that and so on. Then we had Contract Vault. They call themselves the contract ecosystem powering tomorrow's agreements, and doing some really interesting work, creating an interesting platform to make it easier to not just have smart contracts, but ensure that they're enforceable in law. In the property area, we had CPROP, who say they will become an integrated platform that enables property investors to research and transact internationally. So really exciting, speeding things up, lowering costs, and bringing lots of new transactions, making them possible, bringing them together. Then Loyak, as a blockchain-enabled business relationship platform, was next, followed by Utimis, a reputation token for small businesses in Latin America, that, by the end of the session, people were talking about this as kind of the new Alibaba, but for Latin America. Finally, we had Nostrum's meal token, from an established chain of restaurants that flow across the whole of Europe. This is a listed company who are creating their own new token, as a way of accelerating growth and participation from the many, many people who use their restaurants. So huge diversity, and great reach across the globe. A really buzzy session, and the great news is that even before we closed for the day and started to exit the building, we know that deals were done. So that will go on. We're going to be using the TokenIntelligence platform I mentioned to make all of that available, all of the information available, the white papers, some background information, and lots more from the day available to all of those participants going forward. So a really exciting day. And there are going to be more of them. We're planning the next events probably late May. So if anyone listening would like to be involved in the next of those events, either as an ICO, talking to potential investors, or as the other side of the fence, please do let me know. But as we head into Easter, I've been giving quite a lot of thought to what you might call the state of the blockchain nation. And I say the blockchain nation because this is something that's intrinsically global. It's very clear that we heard one of the speakers in a pre-meeting on Friday, talking about the Ethereum team being based in London. I certainly know that the Ethereum team, or at least some of them, were based in Canada. And success has many fathers, but one of the conclusions that you can draw straight away from that is that this is a global change, and it is bringing things together. You could talk about, I guess, the state of the blockchain nations, because we're one of the biggest points of divergence, if not diversity, certainly is the differences in the approach to understanding blockchain from a governmental and a regulatory point of view, and the actions that are going on, some of them peremptory, some of them more thoughtful, across jurisdictions. But I've been invited to chair the day for the 2020 FinTech conference, which has been taking place across America in San Francisco last weekend, in Washington DC, in LA, and so on. It's coming to London about a week from now, and I've been thinking how I can help set the scene for that. And it's very clear to me that we're entering the dawn of the token era. So the dawn of the token era is going to be my title for my opening address at the conference, and I wanted to share a little of that with readers, or should I say listeners, here on ICO Radio ahead of time, because it's going to be an exciting conference at a really exciting time in the development of this whole new landscape. This is the creation of a new global networked economy of value. We've had and seen the change and the power of the change that came when we were able to, first of all, interconnect information, the original vision of the web. Then the new surge of power that came when we were able to interconnect people, hyper connectivity of us all via the web. Now, on top of that, not instead of it, a new layer building again. We're at the dawn of the token era, which is creating an internet of value. And I believe there can be no doubt that we are indeed entering the dawn of the era of digital tokens, a new kind of frictionless economy based on this Internet of Value. And let's put that in a historical perspective. So the Internet was invented back in the 70s originally as ARPANET, and it found some uses apart from the military and universities and some corporates who could afford the very high costs and fees. But it didn't really take off for about 20 years until the late 90s and the dawn of the web, which enabled it to become more useful, more approachable. Netscape brought images because it was text only before then, and it became much more approachable. And so this was 20 years ago again, and the web was using the internet as a building block, as a foundation, as a substrate to go to a whole new level. And that gave us the internet as we now know it, onto which was grafted fairly swiftly, and not without a good deal of difficulty, the ability to transact. But that ability to transact e-commerce was based on fundamentally offline institutions. But now we're fortunate enough to be at the dawn of the next stage of that evolution. One will have greater impact even than that, difficult though that may be to imagine. So if you think of Bitcoin and the comments of people like Mark Carney at the Bank of England, you may well doubt this, but forget Bitcoin for a moment and think of blockchain and the whole wide range of not just other currencies that it's already spawned, over 1,000, with lots of different characteristics that were glossed over and not represented in Mark Carney's speech, but also of all the many and varied different applications of that when we have a reliable, trustworthy Internet of Value. Think also of the many, many banks, pretty much every bank around the world, who have launched their own blockchain lab, who are trying to figure out how to adopt and adapt this technology for their own purposes, to keep and avoid being disrupted, to put in fact, this new wine into the old wineskins. You may have wondered if you've read my recent critique, but I am frankly an admirer of both Andy Haldane and Mark Carney at the Bank of England. Problematic as though Mark's recent speech undoubtedly is, and it just simply doesn't hold water as a treatise about money, let alone the future of money. As I've pointed out, what it does tell us is that the age of the digital token has arrived. His conclusions from that speech are very powerful in themselves, in terms of accepting that digital currencies and blockchain form part of the future and need to be normalized as part of the future economy. So to put it simply, Bitcoin may be controversial, but blockchain is not. It's the future. There's a wide consensus among those who've taken it serious enough to look closely that this is a game changer, and that it's explosively powerful, in much the same way as the web in its day that brought us the web, the internet, social media, and hyperconnectivity. All this has undoubtedly speeded up the existing economy, but just imagine the impact on top of, and as well as all that, of the internet of value, when transactions can be pretty much instant, when in some transactions, even in the highly developed Western economies, can take days or weeks. As we were hearing on Friday, in Latin America and some other economies, can take hours sitting in a bank, 4 hours in a bank, typically for some transactions, plus weeks to go through. So the potential for speeding up the Western economies is enormous. Add to that the potential for leapfrogging for some of these other economies, and it's absolutely phenomenal. So at the dawn of this new era, there really is going to be major change. This is a speeding train. And I'll also be touching on the issue of regulation. As I said, there's a lot of divergence, indeed confusion around the world as to how this can all happen without speeding out of control. And the obvious answer, of course, is regulation. And going back to basics on this, a regulator is something that originally was built into a machine to stop it spinning out of control, going beyond its design parameters, and perhaps exploding, damaging itself and others around it. What does not seem to have sunk in yet is not only is the blockchain environment created using this technology secure, but it's secure in a way that regulators have yet to come to grips with, and was not because it was not possible before, perhaps. And it has yet to dawn that, in fact, judiciously combined with the lessons that we've learned about identity, about transparency, and combining them to bring accountability through our experiences over the last 5 to 10 years with crowdfunding, that actually the regulatory burden can be significantly reduced. I mean, very significantly reduced. I saw a figure of 32 billion as the cost so far of the necessary regulation from the Dodd-Frank Act. And one way of looking at that is if the other tools were available, that almost none of that cost would be necessary. And of course, that's a fraction of the overall regulatory cost, not even including the opportunity cost, the innovation costs that this older, creaking Model T regulation is causing, and the friction along with it. But what is yet to be realised is, well, in fact, the question is often asked: how do you regulate blockchain? Without realising that in actual fact, blockchain itself is the dream tool for any regulator. Why would that be? Why would blockchain be a dream tool for a regulator? Well, first of all, remember and recall that it provides an immutable, tamper-proof trail that is applied well, available to the right people, providing a kind of CCTV for transactions and even interactions that can be available to regulators alone or to the public entirely. It is a new tool, it creates new environments, and is in many ways exactly the kind of tool a regulator needs to be able to stop and halt the need to police and halt innovation and ordinary actions that are positive, and police the exceptions and those who would seek to subvert and go outside what is acceptable. Not only that, but it brings to life the vision that I believe Andy Haldane at the Bank of England has talked about, of having the means to learn what's going on and learn from what's going on in the economy and even in the entrepreneurial and innovative economy in real time. So in many ways, the boot is on the other foot here, and it's time for regulators to realise that this is not going to be a time to look to the old tools. In fact, the old tools just simply have run out of steam. They won't work in this new environment, and they can't. They are old wineskins. They can't contain this new wine. However, the tools are here to be used, and the right approaches can both reduce costs and reduce friction and free things up for innovators, while having the new levels of safety that we could not even begin to dream of under existing regulatory regimes and with existing regulatory tools. So we could, and indeed should, be entering a new era of smart regulation. And that is good news for innovators. It's good news for consumers and people generally. It's good news for regulators as well, except in those cases where there are incumbents, typically in the existing economy, who just want things as they are. But that's not how this is supposed to work. And the very concept that we now have the potential to have competing currencies, with the Bank of England needing, looking at Mark Carney's speech, to adapt to an environment where they will need to compete with in a world with cryptocurrencies and crypto assets, as they prefer to call them. It is absolutely revolutionary on the one hand, but on the other goes to the essence of capitalism itself. I suppose that might almost lead to the question as to whether transparency born on the blockchain, maybe it won't happen of its own accord, and we most probably do need to ensure that we move in the right direction with this and recognise the power of identity and transparency added to the blockchain. But those together could, be the salvation of capitalism by bringing a new level of accountability and transparency. So looking ahead now to the 4th of April, at Level 39 and the 2020 FinTech Conference. Go to 2020fintech.com if you want some more information, or to join us, by the way. We'll be exploring this in more detail and doing so with some of the absolute global leaders in the field, including the Gibraltar Blockchain Exchange, an initiative from the Gibraltar Stock Exchange, who have worked closely to create new regulation to support this with their own regulator. They've launched the ROC token, and they'll be keynoting at the conference, along with ICO Box, who will be with us, and ITO Biometrics, Lead Point. We'll be hearing from Cora, who those of you who've listened to other episodes here will be familiar with, and they'll be talking about how that although talent is evenly distributed, opportunity is not, and how they plan to do something about that. Plus Mobilium, and, well, a range of others that you'll find on the website shortly at 2020fintech.com. So I'll arrange for the links to that to be in the show notes, together actually with, we will be able to give you actually a discount code that will give you a 30% discount if you use it and join us. And I hope to see some of the listeners from ICO Radio come join us in London on the 4th of April at level 39. Hope you can make it, and if you can, please come and say hi, and hope to see you there. But for this episode of Blockchain Bytes, bye for now.
ICO Radio was brought to you by author, speaker, transparency and clarity advocate, and award-winning software innovator Barry James. Get in touch with the programme, put yourself or someone else forward as a guest, visit iconewsdesk.com. And if you've enjoyed the show, please leave a review. And don't forget to subscribe to get your next insights and interviews from the ICO Radio podcast.